Okay, fantastic that we're all here today. And I just want to say a few words on behalf of the Biodiversity Center. We're really excited to have this seminar today jointly with the SwissForestLab. So the idea is to bring together people from different units, even more than we normally do, to kind of look at themes that go across forests and biodiversity. So we're very excited to have this particular talk today. Thank you very much. And in the future, we, as the Biodiversity Center and with the other centers, we hope to have more of these seminars that sort of cross centers or cross, sort of specifically cross different groups at VSL. So looking forward to those in the future as well. And on a final note, we have a few slots left in our biodiversity seminar series for the fall. So if you have someone you really want to invite, there's a couple slots and you have this opportunity as well. Just make sure to talk to Nadia and she'll set that up for you. So with that, I will let you introduce the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and I have the pleasure to introduce Pierre Vollenweider to you. Pierre is working since over 25 years on different topics of plant stress responses. He is a specialist in functional plant and anatomy, and he is really, and I learned him, what I noticed first when I came here, that he's a specialist in microscopy and in ozone effects on plant functioning and also on plant anatomy. Pierre is also lecturer, not only here working at WSL, but also lecturer at the University of Lausanne. And what I learned today, he is owner and manager of a 10-hectare forest in Western Switzerland. So he is really a perfect person to introduce the SwissForestLab and the things we are doing within forests in Switzerland. And his topic is really also going into the history of the forest in Switzerland and about the impact of understory removal on different functionings of forests. Pierre.
Okay, thank you very much for your kind words and the introduction. Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased and very honored to be here and to have a possibility presenting some of the research of our lab within this framework. So the topic of today is compositional and functional responses to experimental understory removal in the soil and ground vegetation of former wooded pastures, nowadays abandoned, after millennia of overuse. A long title covering many aspects we are going to go through. That's a long story. We start the travel here. We are close to VSL. I have seen from the question that people were not immediately realizing that it's basically the way forests here around were looking like, and it is here in the 1815. We are here on the Albis chain. The lake that you see in the background, that's the Tyrlersee. The lake here, and the forest. You see what you have. You have oak. You have perhaps oaks. You have beeches, but you have pines. We were seeing better before. And you have a completely open forest structure. You have you have erosion signs. You see it's very grassy. It's open, no regeneration. And here you have the main actors. That's goats. And with a sheep herder, there's a woman which is collecting somewhere close by. And that's the reality of a forest by the time. It was the end for this region. But in some other places, and especially in the Central Alps, it has been a lasting way of using forest for one more century. And and it has a long legacy on the way still forests look like and function nowadays. So the topic of my talk, I'm going to talk with about wooded pastures. We have started. A big question is the new issue of climate change for the forest and how it interacts with that all. And then I will talk about a particular experiment experiment. It's a small size experiment, but it is strategically located and raising different questions that we try to track and to find answers. I will talk today, I will focus on the responses we have observed in the ecosystem, especially in the soil and in the ground vegetation, and then a small conclusion. So I was saying that Switzerland has a strong legacy of wooded pastures. Is one sees here, the pastures is all these colors, so it's most of the places one see in the mountains, but it's also something which is still lasting and enduring tradition, and here it's rated as mixed crops. It's what you see for the Jura region. It's the place I'm from that region. And what you see is something similar you were seeing on the first image. An open forest, very grassy underground, no regeneration. And this thing has been widespread. One thing that Wilhelm Tell is the founder of the Swiss country. It's not Wilhelm Tell. That's the conflicts between the farmers in Canton Schwyz and the monks in Einsiedeln, who are the true founders of our country. And it's in relation to cheese production, meat production, and export to the markets which were in Italy by the Middle Age. So it has nevertheless changed, as we all know about, and especially at low elevation within the Central Alps. And here you have a research site. I will talk in details. It's the region of Salgesch, where the last land use was a wooded pasture. And so one need to remember that for a very long time, for millennia, the main use of a forest were not wood production. It was about agricultural use. It was producing further food products for the survival of the population. And at the research site, Central Alps, some of the main product which was collected was the forest litter, and it was in complement replacement of the straw. There was not enough straw production to bind the dung in the stables and then to use it to mend the fields. And another main use, and we find back our first illustration, was grazing with cattle, and especially with goats. The goats, 5 goats was enough to sustain a family. It was called the poor man's cow, the goat. So it was absolutely essential. It was throughout Switzerland that you had goats for sustaining the families. And what you see amazing are the dates. Here you are in 1965, here is 1920. All these uses north of the Alps, as I said, canceled in the 18th, 19th century. In other parts of Europe, the wars, for example, had dramatic effects. In France, the farmers were killed during the First World War. But in Switzerland, it lasted at some places a much longer time. And within the Central Valley, so you have here indication of a land use, main land use, and you have a turn which is you have the situation before 1930 and after 1930, where you have the start of the evolution. And you see the land use for the forest at low elevation and totally between the wood pastures with goats and sheep, or the forest litter collecting. And you see a reduction between 1930 and after 1930. And what is circled here is our research sites where the land use, these land use, especially the goat grazing, has been continued until the 1960s. approximately. And here about the dynamics, independently of the different curves, what we're interested in is the dynamics. What you see is that the real turn and change in the land use is after the Second World War, and terminating about the 1960s. It's the story of a Salgesch research site. And you have to put this in relationship with the industrialization. 1950s is the time when the dams have been built in the valley, and the move of the population to main cities in valley and outside of valley. So a small overview how we changed for the forest. Here you have an amazing picture. It's an aerial picture, amazing regarding the resolution of what one can see in these pictures. And here you have the same spot. It is about Salgesch. It's within the experimental site, how it looks nowadays. So here you find back what I have said about wooded pasture, the typical forest, rather even age forest, would be a majority or practically only pine trees. In this case, open forest, and you have a grassy underground. What you see in addition is the goat paths through the forest here, the goat trails going through. And nowadays, it is the way it looks like, much more bushy. You don't see the forest the trees individually very well because there is a lot of reclamation. You have a lot of dying trees also lying on the ground. That's another issue. There has been a change in the forest composition. And here you have a change which one can connect with the change in the land use, comparing the situation in 1994 and 1930, and for the main tree species. And you see a reduction of a pine. Nowadays, I think the values would be still lower because of the decline of the pines, but it was already on the move. What remains also reality is that the pines, whatever one says, remains a very important species at low elevation in the valley. What are the numbers exactly? 40%, 50% to see. You see this also in the forest structure. Here's that's a LIDAR image in false color, and with the height of the vegetation, which is given with this false color. The darker, the bigger the trees are. And here what you see is the Salgesch experimental site, and you have patches of forest, and you see that there is a vegetation of different height, and because it is made of remnants of the past land use, of a past wooded passage structure, and reclaiming vegetation. And I have located two spots. So it's how it looks in majority, a few overstanding dominant pine trees, and a very bushy and thriving reclaiming vegetation. And on the other side, at some places, often the most of the driest place, what is amazing, you still see the wooded pasture structure. The forest so open, even-aged, large trees, very grassy, underground, practically no bushes, and so on. Practically no change in more than 50 years. Now there is another legacy. When we have made a needle analysis, what we have found is a dramatic needle element deficiencies. And that you see, you have most elements in these pine needle foliage. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, it's here. You have most macronutrients which are deficient, and you have also several micronutrients showing important deficiencies. And we have found also symptoms of deficiencies. Here it's the cross section of a pine needle, and you have a typical boron deficiency symptoms in the form of a third vascular bundle within the needle veinlet. So when you are in when you have a calcareous background, that you have neutral pH, as it is the case here, then you expect to have some deficiencies. There are 4 elements of concern: it's phosphorus, manganese, iron, and zinc. What you see in that case is that you have deficiencies for only 2 of them, it's iron and phosphorus, but not for the others. And then a likely explanation of what we see is the legacy of the land use, probably mostly the removal of a litter. Again, for the millennia, this land use is since the Neolithic, and you are close to a village. So very likely a fact and legacy of that time. What is also amazing is the concentration of carbon. You have more than 50% of carbon within these needles. They are very sturdy, very thick cells. A normal rule is about 45% of carbon within plant tissues. Notice also these results. I will briefly mention this later. You have a higher pH in the removal treatment. We will see this when we will talk about the vegetation. Now about the climate. It's a special place, Salgesch. It's a warm climate. It's not the warmer. The annual temperature is 12.3 degrees. What is important is that, as in other places, similar to the situation in the rest of Switzerland, it has experienced warming since year 1864. So climate change is active, and especially regarding the temperature. But what is really special about the climate is that the Salgesch research site is in the driest region of Switzerland. And the precipitation are less than 600 millimeter per year. It's 595 to be precise, to be accurate. Here, not much change since the end of small glacial age. No significant and no tendency also to changes in the precipitation. The climate change, raising temperature, have been put in relationship with the pine decline of pine forest, which has been observed throughout the world and in many stands in Europe. One of them, which is cited in that paper, it is the Central Valley. Here you have the Visp site. So LVFV Visp site, and during one decline event. And these event declines have been put in relationship with drought event, with mortality increase, rate of mortalities observed a couple years after major drought events. And it was a motivation of establishing the Salgesch experiment. The main focus was not the ground vegetation or the soil. The main focus was about the trees and better understanding what is the role of the water, and especially the water, the moisture availability in the soil. And that's the reason that this site was selected. There was these dominant pines, and then one could isolate the competition effect from the lower vegetation, but without having a light competition effect. One knows the pines are very sensitive about it. Now let's move to the context, the geological context of the site. And it has also some further actuality. What you see is here the research site. You see it's a special place. You have a village, very old village. You have vineyards. Before it was field crops. And you have forest patches and huge areas where you have barren vegetation, steppe vegetation basically. And you have these green streaks. It's a water channel to bring the water in the valley from the glaciers. And now when I have a further look and further thought, what you see here are the mandate landscape from one of the biggest landslides, even in the Alps. What you see here, that the rock slide scar left on the mountain side, and what you have here, that's the colluvians which have accumulated from that landslide. And where you have forest, it's only because you have colluvians. And where you don't have colluvians, the soil is too shallow and the climate is too dry to have forest stands. It's, I said, one of the biggest events. Blatten, it was 9 million cubic meters, 2 kilometers run out from the debris. Here it's 1.5 billion cubic meters, and the run out is 14 kilometers within the Rhone Valley. It blocked the Rhone Valley, it created a big lake, which was around for centuries, probably, because before it broke up. And when you see the hills near Sierre or in the valley, it's these landslides. So it has a very importantly, it's very important regarding the soil that you have on the Salgesch side. You have a colluvian material, but interesting, also the date, sorry, the date of the landslide is by the end of the boreal zone, boreal chronozone. And so it means about 8,000 years before present. So it occurred when there was already soil formation, and you have a colluvian material which is stopping in several places loess accumulation. So wind sediments, loess accumulation on the bedrock. And what one sees also is the dryness of the site, is especially with the top humus layer. You have a moderate site, a moderate humus because of the drought. And if you would look further, we would see also arid signs is calcite precipitation in the channels in the ground. So everything I'm going to show afterwards is coming from, has been analyzed on the topsoil layer. Then about the experiment. The experiment has been established centered on pines. The pine was the main focus, as I said before, and we established 6 plots, 12 plots, 6 with an understory remover, so removing the understory vegetation, woody understory vegetation on the 5-meter radius from central pine. And 6 control plots were selected and left with the understory vegetation. And as you see, the trees have been equipped with all sorts of devices, but I'm not going to talk about this part of our research at Salgesch. So here you have the experimental plan and the assessment which have been performed in this experiment. You have 1 central pine, and all assessment about the soils have been made making sampling in a band around the central pine, 3 meters location, to equalize the influence from the boarding vegetation and that of the central pine. And what has been assessed, or what is in assessment, is we are making observation on pine foliage, on the pine stem growth, on the ground vegetation, and on the soil properties. And I will insist mostly on these 2 parts of our assessment. I have already shown some of the results we have about the mineral nutrition. What have been the effect of the experiment. The effect is twofold. On one hand, there has been a rise in the temperatures, especially during the summer. Sometimes there is also lower temperatures during the winter, during cold winter. The second effect has been an increase in the soil moisture, in the volumetric water content inside the soil. To see also the dynamics, so on a year basis, the wettest moment in the soil, beginning of the year, and it becomes incredibly drier until the autumn. And the second thing is that the effect of the treatment was established at the beginning and never changed afterwards. Here, in summary, the comparison between the two treatments. So we come to about between 0.015 and 0.050 more volumetric water content in response to the treatment, and to about 1 degree. This is yearly averages. And the question is then how the ecosystem has reacted to these higher availability of moisture and to these higher temperatures. What are the dominant effects? So rather rapidly, we have noticed changes in the soil, in the ground vegetation, and we could verify. Yeah, and we could verify with some analyses that we had indeed reduction in the thickness in response to the treatment, a reduction in the thickness of the litter layer. And we further confirmed this change analyzing the carbon stocks, and we found an effect for the top soil layer, for the humus layers, lower carbon stocks in response to the treatment, significant effects, small effects, but significant effects. We further analyzed the nutrients, and what we looked at was the extractable nutrients, both which can be analyzed, and we found also an effect, but this time at deeper soil depth, which was significant in the case of potassium and manganese. And for other elements, we have also magnesium, which was decreased. Important, these analyses have been realized recently. It was in 2022. And so we had no mineralization effect, which we have seen in some other, with some other results, some mineralization effect when we have established the treatment. The likely driver is a decrease in litter from the understory vegetation. And what says that is the decreased carbon-nitrogen ratio, which is in a good indication, according to the literature, of a higher share of processed versus fresh organic matter. What about the soil activity? We have been measuring respiration during 2 campaigns. Realized first, rather the beginning of the treatment, 2013-14, and the second assessment in 2022-23, and making measurements throughout the year. And we could pull that data because we found no significant effect of the period factor. And so we found a significantly reduced respiration in response to the understory treatment, and with a temperature effect, but no significant moisture effect, probably because we did not sample during the driest months, July and August. And comparing the sensitivity to temperature in the two treatment, we found also significant differences. The understory removal treatment being less responsive to higher temperature, which can be ascribed probably to a reduced soil biodiversity in microorganisms. We then investigated the mineralization. We made several experiments. That's the one which really worked well. Mineralization experiment with litter bags, and taking forest litter close by, either pine needles or oak litter, which was cut in smaller, the leaves were cut in smaller pieces. And we put them at the topsoil, on the topsoil layer, and we had repeated sampling. It was between the autumn of 2022 and 2023. We had also two meshes, 5 millimeter meshes to let the soil mesofauna come in, and also 0.1 millimeter, so the material accessible only to microorganisms within the soil. What we found was a low decomposition rates, and for some of the bags, and especially in the case of oak litter accessible to the soil fauna, we had a reduction of the decomposition in response to the treatment. We had the last sampling in November 2023. If you remember, it was then a very wet period, and we had a very nice view of the release of a constraint of a dryness of the sites with an increase dramatic increase in the mineralization, and which favored especially the understory removal treatment, probably for reason of temperature. It's a warmer site, so it could be more responsive to the better mineralization conditions. We had also a look to the soil mesofauna, analyzing different groups, and which are living at different depth within the soil, at the surface, or those deep in the soil, more specialized in the soil. And here you see that the composition of the soil mesofauna is clearly different between the two treatments. These soil mesofauna can be used to, here you see the October sampling. We had also sampling by the end of the winter, so the end of the dormancy season, where there were no differences between the two treatments. Only when it was really well active that one could see something. One can use also the microarthropods to assess the soil quality. And it's a method called soil biological quality, QBS, .R for the microarthropods. And this method by Parisi and colleagues give a score to the group and in function of their specialization. And with the fact that the more specialized is a group, and more there are of this group, the more the quality, better soil, you have a better soil quality. And this specialization can be estimated on the basis of the morphology of the animals to calculate called ecological morphological index, and which is rating from 1 to 20, 20 for the groups which are highly adapted to the soil, and 1 for those which are very bacteria living at the soil surface and which are not so sensitive to the soil conditions. And the difference in the specialization, the more adapted you have a group, you have typically smaller size, you have no pigmentation, you have small legs, no eyes, or very primitive eyes. And using these methods, one can calculate indices for the plots, for different replicates we had in the plots, and we found we could show also based on the arthropods that there was a significant difference in the soil quality, which was reduced in response to the understory removal treatment. So let's synthesize a little bit these findings about the soils. After more than 10 years of understory removal treatment, we have found that the topsoil organic layers were reduced because of missing litter inputs, which also caused a reduction of carbon stocks. There was less extractable macro and micronutrients. The soil respiration was reduced and responded less to changes in temperature as a likely consequence of lower microbial biodiversity. And also, we didn't find change in root biomass. It's another indication that's a biodiversity, microbial biodiversity effect. The mineralization of litter, especially by the soil macro and mesofauna, tended to decrease, and several macro arthropod groups were reduced, and the soil biological quality was also reduced. So in synthesis, one can say that understory removal lowered the soil fertility. What about the vegetation? Vegetation, also you see the pictures, we had also soon an impression that there were big differences in response to the treatment. So we make relevays, several replicates within each plot. And these assessments were conducted in 2019, so several years after the establishment of the experiment. And we compare the plant communities, we analyze the plant communities with principal component analysis using not only the abundance, but also the indicator values using average of indicator scores to also analyze the ecology and the ecological indications provided by the ground vegetation. So as one sees here and confirms statistically, the two treatments were clearly different in the plant composition, small effect as always, but highly significant. Now, what is very interesting is to analyze the indication provided about the ecology, the site ecology. What we see is that the plant communities in the understory removal treatment were more thermophilous, which was expected according to the treatment. But the surprise is that they were less. The humidity factor was pointing in the opposite direction, meaning that the vegetation has responded to the temperature, but has since the process is more constraining regarding the soil water availability. Another indication is very interesting is the humus. More humus in the case of the control plots, also expected according to the results about the soil litter. And I was pointing at the pH is here. It's the reaction of the soil reaction, higher soil reaction in the case of understory removal is also something which is confirmed by the measurement in the site. We have been looking also at the plant functional trait, selecting the most frequent species, between 5 to 11 species according to the site, trying to have the same species between the plots, and assessing 5 individuals in each species, measuring oh, sorry, we're not in the good slide. It's this slide. Measuring the leaf area, the leaf weight, and computing and the leaf water content, and computing leaf dry matter content and specific leaf area. And what we found is completely clear. The foliage of the ground vegetation in response to understory removal has become also more xeromorphic, so more adapted to droughts. So with this, I come to a few conclusions. In the first one is Salgesch ecosystem responding to higher soil moisture and temperature, consequent to more than 10 years of understory removal treatment by a lowered soil fertility, more xerophytic, thermophilous, and xeromorphic ground vegetation. Second conclusion, partially recreating the environmental conditions prior to land use change after abandonment in the 1960s, it appears that the understory removal treatment has stopped and partly reverted a recovery process underway after millennia of land overuse. And the third main conclusion, land reclamation by mixed woody understory in Salgesch has proceeded during and despite increasingly warmer climatic conditions at the driest forest location in Switzerland. And I would like to address a few thanks before closing to colleagues and collaborators in the experiment. First, to the master students, all this work has been performed with master students' work I have shown today. And in the framework of 5 master studies, we have done a great work, and especially Marie Horvat, Thomas Stuber, Johan Anse, and Valérie Collot. Colleagues at VSL, especially Claudia Guidi, Frank Hagedorn, and Patrick Schleppi, they are the true soil specialists. You know, I'm not myself, and they were fantastic in helping in directing the work. And also colleagues at the University of Lausanne and University of Neuchâtel, Pascal Vito, who has been supervising several studies and who is a plant specialist, Edouard Michel, soil biodiversity specialist, Claire Lebaillon, and Jean-Michel Gova, who are 2 well-known soil scientists. And with this, I thank you for your kind attention. And we'll be very happy for your question. We'll do my very best to answer you.
Yes, are there questions? I have one. Oh, Tom.
In the very beginning, I think one of the main aims of this experiment was to check whether a removal may help the trees to survive in the drought. And I'm not quite sure now, after the results, if this could be confirmed.
You have the questions? You had an increase in the growth in response, which was mostly transient. If we look at the tree rings, we see also the experiment started here, and this is the release response in response to the drought. So survival, no effect. I've been say the thing is that it was not expected. I think that the trees would last so long because there was already a lot of sign of declines. I've been losing trees. There is still majority for fire trees according to treatment, and the losses have nothing to do with the treatment in one way or the other. And it's incidental. You have calcograph events, for example, occurring and things like this. What I was lucky is that I have not been suffering from the last heavy snow, which could have damaged a lot of trees as it did in Finland.
More questions? Yes.
Thank you, Pierre. Maybe I misunderstood. Didn't you say in the beginning, you mentioned how the development of temperature and drought was at the site? over long term. You said it was not, there was no change. Did I misunderstand?
Regarding the climatic conditions.
Yes.
Okay. Regarding the climatic conditions where there has been no change is regarding the precipitation.
Okay.
And no tendency and no big change. I have also detailed statistic with regard to the site from the beginning because we have a meteo station which is just below. It's from Agro-Meteo Station, also from Agroscope. And sorry, it's here. Here you have the results, and you have also no trend in the temperature, in the temperatures or in the precipitation since 2010. And this is contrasting with some other results for the Valais, for other station. I think it relates probably to the dryness of the site. It's already so dry. There is already so little precipitation. There's not much to change.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Then I come with my question and then the Landolt or Ellenberg values for the vegetation, because you could really show that on the one hand it gets warmer, but it also gets moister below your treatments, but the indicator values were pointing to more xeromorphic species. And certainly we have to distinguish most likely between air humidity and soil moisture. Could that effect of higher temperatures and potentially higher water pressure deficit in the atmosphere kind of confound these indicator value effects, or is there another reason?
What I think so, the vegetation in the understory removal treatment is more thermophilous, and it is also the moisture is pointing to the control, so it means that there is less moisture availability. I think what it means in these changes is probably mostly that the certainly higher vapor pressure deficit have a prevailing role, and I would say that the foliage is more xeromorphic, goes also well in this direction, and that for the supplementary water there is two possibilities. The first one is that it's so little that it does not change the thing, but the moisture has dramatic effect. The other thing is that there is a winner in this whole thing, and that's the pine trees. And the pine trees, they have sense that there is more water, and they don't care that there is higher VPD. And this is also very interesting information from the experiments.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, it was also very diverse picture.
Thank you.
We kind of put it all in the light of this formulation. I mean, this plan is also included maybe goats moving, litter raking, and you know, I mean, this will also have a tremendous effect on various things. Related to your artificial.
Yes. Yes, I completely agree, and that's a big question. What was the dunk from the goat doing to the stands? How did it change the things? Certainly the nitrogen, we would see other values. The point, what is important is also in the details. The goats were going every day through the surface. They were collected. The people were moving it to how to say, a small place where you have stone walls around. They are still visible, and then there was a herder who was taking the goats and putting them throughout the surface. And at some times there were sheep. So it was really intensive land use. So the dung should have an effect. No, the goats have never improved much the environment. One was saying, I remember from the time of my studies, when the goats were starving, then the farmers, it was over for him because they were not leaving anything. So I think that there was a revenue an exhaustion. One should rather think of an exhaustion of the environment rather than some mending effects and improvement of environmental conditions.
I was a bit interested in the composition of the plants, both from the perspective of did the goats actually prefer certain, well, they eat everything, but were there some things that they didn't eat, which would then sort of be dominant in those sites that you can still see the signature of? And maybe additionally, if we think about trees versus sort of other understory types of vegetation, do you see sort of a new forest coming up? Like, is it going to change from a pine-dominated forest to something else? So just a little more about the compositional impacts of the treatment and the new.
So the point in many places, you have a replacement of what was a dominating pine forest by deciduous trees, mostly oaks, but at other places. In the case of Salgesch experiment, that's not the case. You have yearly mixed reclamation by the forest. I have not mentioned, but the phytosociological association is an odontopinnatum, and it's very typical for the vegetation you have over there in comparison to that classical for this association, and you don't see really a change in what is coming and reclaiming. And some places you have very dense reclamation by the pines. What I wonder also is the effect of a land use. I know from some American studies where they have put whether there is a relationship between the reclamation, type of reclamation, if it is conifers or if it is deciduous trees, and the land use has been done, and they could find something. I don't know some such work in Europe, and I've been wondering if in the sort of reclamation there was a relationship with the past land use, but I don't know, and I don't see tendencies.
We have still time for more questions. Oh, I'd have another one.
Yep.
Because you showed that these removal of understory, and certainly which simulates the browsing of sheep and goat, has rather negative effects on the soil nutrient availability, just because there is less litterfall. I think that's the main reason. But on the other hand, you also showed that growth of the standing pines is increasing, and you said no difference in mortality, but maybe that's due to mortality is still a rare event, and with a replicate of 6, you might not see that. But on the other hand, we know that there is more water available for the pines. We also notice that we have high mortality, even so there is not more drought events in the valley in the last 40, 50 years, but these drought events now kill the trees. And I think Stefan, he is not here, unfortunately, but he postulated in his paper that this is related to the higher atmospheric water demand, so that the trees, they take up the water, and then if it's not raining in late summer, then there is no water left. But would that be maybe just goat and sheep browsing, a management measure for the future to allow the Scots pine trees to survive future droughts? Or are the negative effects kind of so important that we shouldn't do that?
How to balance the goal of management? It's a fascinating question, and I think complex at the same time. So I think with regard to the BPD, due that they are dominant the pines, I don't think that there was much change for the trees. And we have also functional traits data from the trees. We see that there is adjustment year to year. We see very little effect on the xeromorphic of pine needle foliage, because I think, again, it did not change much of the stuff. At the same time, you mentioned this decline event, and it's logical when the conditions are, there is more stress there, you have these increase that all plants need water in the end. The point also would be to see if there is not a connection with also some outbreaks, some pest outbreaks, because I know of some other region where you see this. You have you have a huge fir decline, which is at the foot of the Jura Mountains, white fir decline, and it's basically because we were not in the correct station. Then there was the increasing drought, and then in the end there was the pitocanus event outbreaks over there. So for the management with regard to that place, I think what need to be encouraged in the sense of maintaining the forest, it is the reclaiming vegetation to give it better solution, and probably to keep it mixed. When we see the event in April and how the oaks have been damaged, the pine have been also damaged somewhat, but the oaks is dramatic. Better to mix it to set on mixed vegetation. And there is another point, and that's, I think especially for this greening, the vegetation, round vegetation is much more interesting in the understory removal. Then you have under the cover of the trees for logical reason. So for both biodiversity reason, then the point of view is changing.
Thank you. I don't think there is more questions. So thanks again, Pierre, for that very interesting talk, bringing us to the history of land use in Switzerland, to really the current and future problems of climate change impacts and how water and nutrient availability is affected by management. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.